Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome here to the NLA. Welcome to the London Centre. My name's Catherine Stanyland. I'm the Chief Impact Officer here at NLA. You are all very welcome here for what has become a real key moment in the NLA calendar, our annual Innovation Conference. And it's a real pleasure to see lots of you here from across the built environment, from across innovation, from across the public sector and across the investment communities here as well. So this is a conference that has become a moment for us to step back, take a look at what is happening across London in the innovation sector, the strength and direction of our innovation economy, and what this means for the places, the partnerships and the infrastructure that we are creating across the city. Today we're going to be talking about life sciences, AI, climate tech, advanced engineering and frontier technologies, sectors that are all reshaping the way that the city works and the way that our places and the way that our investment flows and how our districts evolve across the city, and increasingly so how our cities compete internationally as well. And of course, for everyone in this room, the challenge isn't just about creating new buildings, it's about creating the conditions in which innovation can thrive through long-term partnerships between public and private sectors, institutions, communities and the industry, which is why I'm so pleased to have such a great panel of people here today to share their thinking on how we're making that happen. And this is exactly what we aim to do at NLA, bring the whole sector together. For those of you who haven't come across us before, NLA is the membership body for London's built environment sector. Our members represent all of the leading organisations that plan, fund, design and build and operate our cities globally. And here from our home at the London Centre, we run a really busy annual programme which is here to drive excellence, to build long-term relationships and to champion our sector here and around the world. So today's conference, we're going to move from the big strategic picture, London's position as a global innovation city, to the practical realities of delivery. We'll be looking at how innovation districts are governed, how partnerships operate, how places evolve over time, and how growth can create wider economic benefit. We've got 2 sessions with time for questions from all of you at the end of each session. And there'll be a coffee break from 10:30 until 11 o'clock. The bathrooms are just through the door and down the stairs when you need to find them then as well. So our first session, we're going to be exploring London's position as a global innovation city. 1 year ago, our conference took place just as the London Growth Plan was launched, and we were really delighted to hear about the impact that that was going to have on the city and the ambitions for London. So I'm really delighted that today we have Deputy Mayor Howard Dorber here to give us a view 1 year on of the global strength of London's innovation economy, what we've achieved in this last year and the opportunities coming up. So Howard, if I can welcome you to the stage for your opening presentation, and let's give him a round of applause as he comes up.
Thanks very much, Catherine, and good morning. Hope everyone's had their coffee this morning. It's nice that we've got trains running today, which is always a bonus, and we're still working on getting them working for the rest of the week, but let's see. As you just heard, a year ago we published the London Growth Plan, which was meant to be a long-term 10-year plan looking at some of the fundamentals, as well as the shorter-term actions that we need to do to make sure London continues to grow. We looked at the fundamental building blocks of business in this city, as they are in any city, really, which are people, ideas, money, space to do your business, the physical infrastructure to support it, and a stable regulatory, political and legal infrastructure. And I'll come on to some of those, and maybe we'll do some of these in the panel as well. But really today we're talking about the ideas part. And one of the key things that came out of the growth plan is that London already is one of the world's great centres of innovation. We looked at London not just as a collection of sectors that are operating independently, but as an interconnected ecosystem, what we call a galaxy of clusters, a polycentric city. And unlike many other international cities, we're really good at a lot of things. If you go to pretty much any other country in the world, you'll find that the legal capital or the financial capital or the political capital or the cultural capital are in different places. And in the UK, all of those things are concentrated in London. And that interconnected galaxy of clusters is one of the reasons why London consistently ranks among the top cities in the world in different studies. And we've just come top again in the Resonance Global study of the best cities in the world. It's a 12th year running we've topped that. And we come very high, not just in the economics and the innovation and the business things that are happening, but in things like livability as a city and, believe it or not, lovability as a city. And those things support our amazing interconnected ecosystem because London being a great place to live, a great place to bring up kids, a great place to relax and spend your leisure time is crucial to why people choose to bring their startups, their scale-ups, and their investment here. And particularly at the moment, we are very much at the top of the rankings for life sciences, for artificial intelligence, for climate tech, quantum, for fintech, and the creative industries. Europe's largest tech ecosystem, London, the highest number of unicorns in Europe, 8 unicorns so far this year. And just to be clear, unicorns are startup businesses that have raised capital to be valued at over $1 billion. In fact, we're now at 155 unicorns out of London. And to put that in context with the rest of Europe, that London figure, not UK figure, but the London figure, is more than the next 4 countries put together. The economists called us the scale-up capital of the rest of the world. $11.7 billion of VC funding raised last year. We actually outraised Silicon Valley 1 quarter last year. And just by comparison, the next biggest cluster in the UK is Cambridge, and Cambridge raised 724 million last year. So we're at 11.7 billion, Cambridge 724 million. And generally, for a lot of things, we regard Oxford and Cambridge as suburbs of London, particularly when we want to add the figures together. But they are, genuinely. I mean, I was in San Francisco in February for the JP Morgan Life Sciences Conference, and we drove out to Palo Alto for a meeting and drove back to the city. And that's a pretty normal thing to do in San Francisco. Palo Alto is further out from San Francisco Centre than Cambridge is from London. And yet that's absolutely seen as part of one ecosystem in the States. We've got to stop seeing London and Cambridge and Oxford and Leeds and Manchester and even Edinburgh and Glasgow as separate. These are absolutely part of the same ecosystem, and we should be working more closely together with other parts of the UK outside of London. We had, just in the last couple of months, two very important AI businesses raising money. One was the largest ever in Europe seed funding round, $1.1 billion of seed funding, valuing the business at over $5 billion. That's Ineffable Intelligence, which is set up by David Silver, ex-DeepMind, working with UCL. And then another one, Recursive Intelligence, that raised $500 million. They haven't even launched yet. So it's not actually even announced as a business. It's set up, I think it was incorporated at the end of last year. It's already raised $500 million. So we absolutely are, particularly physically around the sort of King's Cross and North London area, we absolutely are one of the global capitals of AI. In life sciences, anchored by UCL, by Imperial, by King's, the Cricket Institute, and London's 5 university and teaching hospital combinations, we are now one of the top emerging life science clusters in the world. We weren't even in the top 10 a few years ago. And now, by some measures, we're in the top 5 and certainly heading for those sort of top position in Europe. And last year, our expanded London Life Sciences Week, we attracted over 5,000 visitors, very, very high-end involvement of VCs and startup businesses from around the world. And we achieved one of the things we were aiming to do over time, which is to be identified as probably the JP Morgan conference of Europe. And I was with Flagship Technologies, which is the business that created Moderna. They grow their own startups based on their own science. They set up a London office, and they were very enthusiastic about just the people that they were able to talk to in terms of potential recruits in London. Our PhD students in the life sciences sector, in maths, in AI and engineering, are just as good as anywhere else in the world. But you pay them half here what you'd pay in San Francisco, partly because of things like the NHS. So you don't have to put together a whole health package for your employees like you do in the States. And obviously, we don't want to compete on low wages, but these are high wages for us, but we're very competitive compared to other parts of the world. Climate technology. We're probably the second globally in what we call clean tech, venture capital. We have some amazing opportunities in the city in terms of particularly the built environment, retrofit, in grid flexibility, in energy management, and of course in green finance, where we are number 1 globally, with 70 billion raised in green bonds last year, including for the Chinese government through the LSE sustainable bond market. And then in the wider tech sector, we remain the world number 1 centre for fintech. We remain a huge centre for the creative side of technology, for games, for TV and film production. 1 in 5 jobs in the city now in the creative sector. We are now the largest sector of games production outside of California. Number 3 in the world. The 3rd largest globally in film and TV production. And all of the technology that goes in to support that feeds into the other sectors too. So we put all this together, and in the London Growth Plan, we identify some of the things we need to do. It puts innovation at the heart of the city's future, raising productivity, increasing incomes, including increasing incomes for the lowest earners. So we have a poverty reduction target in the Growth Plan as well. Accelerating progress towards net zero and making that a real feature of driving growth in London, and growing services exports. And these aren't abstract goals. They require deliberate alignment of policy, planning, investment, and infrastructure. As I said, innovation in London is an interconnected network, not a single hub. And so physically, we're talking about innovation districts such as the Knowledge Quarter, the West Tech corridor encompassing White City, Old Oak, the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. Then we've got the South London Cancer Hub. We've got 6 life science clusters in the city, including SC1 just south of the river, Canary Wharf, Whitechapel on the east side, and Sutton Cancer Hub in the south. And then looking at support for manufacturing infrastructure that supports our innovation clusters. And this is now new, small prototyping type space for manufacturing. And then we've got a number of what I call windfall sites, particularly around Euston, where the oversight development at Euston could, in theory, generate an extra 41 billion in GVA and support 34,000 jobs by 2053. But it's not just about money and space. It's about power. And for example, we're seeing some real issues on the west side of London where the West London grid capacity and connectivity is holding back strategic investment. And the high growth of high demand industries, of the transition, for example, from fossil fuel vehicles to electric vehicles, which we are promoting, new commercial development, and then, of course, the growth of data centres. It's putting huge pressure on infrastructure. We published an infrastructure plan as part of the growth plan work, and I have to tell you, we need to double the electricity capacity of the city in the next 10 years. And the right time to start doing that would be about 20 years ago. But the second best time is now. But we've got some really big decisions we need to take about not just connectivity to the grid, but also the actual capacity. And then within the built environment, one of the things that London's been really good at is providing the innovative, flexible space. So on the life sciences side, for example, we identified a few years ago that there was going to be a potential constraint due to lack of available lab space. We've now got up to 6 million square feet of flexible lab space, either consented or under development, some of it coming on stream. And one of the crucial things there is going to be making sure that that is flexible enough to accommodate some of the other growing sectors. And it may well be that we have a sort of faster churn of space, with people moving between startup and scale-up space and into growth space, and then into lab space, and back again. So we're going to need to look at things like leases and how we work with some of these businesses where, you know, they may come to you and say, actually, we need space for 50 people. And then the following year, it might be 200 or 300 people. And they may need lab space. And then the year after that, so actually now we need to scale back the lab space. We're going to reduce to 100 people. We're going to set up another centre. You know, that flexibility within deals with occupiers is going to be pretty crucial. So look, we know London has everything it needs to remain a global innovation leader and to, in fact, accelerate our position. We have the talent, we have the institutions, we have the capital, we have the ambition. And what we really need now is alignment on policy, planning and infrastructure, working together to create the places where innovation can really flourish. So some political stability would be nice. Obviously, we're in a really interesting position now. So the mayor, my boss, Sadiq Khan, has a mandate till 2028. He's indicated he might like to run again. There's no term limit, unlike in some other countries. So we're pretty stable. We know where we are and where we're going. And in fact, although, you know, as Keir will tell you, polls can go up as well as down. Sadiq's actually odds on to win again if he were to run again. But obviously we've had a lot of change last week in terms of the local authorities across London, and we're looking at how we can work together with some of the newly elected boroughs on things that we agree on, as well as, of course, the existing Labour authorities and the ones that are no overall control but are likely to end up being Labour-led. We're also looking for some stability at national level. So let's hope that we get a rapid and firm and clear conclusion to the current issues around the leadership of the Labour Party of the country. Because although obviously it's nice to know that the government's got until 2029 before they have to call an election, there is some concern about whether a new leader may result in changes in policy. And that's something that we will certainly be keeping an eye on and feeding into very closely. So, as I said at the start, people, money, space, regulation, stability. We've got the people, probably one of the greatest centres in the world for talent, 542,000 students. In London, 200,000 overseas students, 75,000 STEM students studying masters or PhDs, probably can claim to be the university capital of the world. We have ideas. I've already talked about that. We are an absolute hotbed of ideas. We have money, although, to be honest, a lot of that is coming from America. Nearly all of that VC funding I talked about has come from outside of the UK, and that's something we need to work on because the temptation for a lot of businesses, given that so much of their funding is coming from the other side of the Atlantic, is to actually then move to the other side of the Atlantic. Or even worse, to start up in the first place on the other side of the Atlantic because they're anticipating where the money's going to come from. Stable regulation, our plan from infrastructure, and particularly talking to people in this room, the space to do it. So look, what we really need now to make sure this happens and we capture this moment is the connections and the drive to pull it all together, which is why this meeting today is so important, because it will be some of the people in this room, and the people in this room will be some of the people doing it, that will make all this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Howard, and there's a lot for us to pick up on in the panel discussion to follow from that as well. Thank you for such a thorough overview of the market and where we sit. Our next speaker is Jonathan Trout, who's the Property and Commercial Director at Stanhope, who have really been leading in the development of our innovation places over the past few years and decades, particularly leading around White City, King's Cross and Royal Street, and is going to join us to talk a little bit about what's happening at White City, how they're developing the spaces for the occupiers that they're seeing coming forward, and how you kind of build that asset base for them. So please, Jonathan, if you'd like to come up, and let's give him a round of applause as he joins the stage.
Yes, it's fantastic to go out White City and actually have a huge model of London, and you can actually see it in front of you, number 20 on the map. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Jonathan Trout from Stanhope. I was going to give you a short presentation on our involvement in White City over the last 15 years and its emergence as an innovation district. I was lucky enough to be involved from 2011 when Stanhope first started looking at Television Centre, and have been involved in all of our projects since then. So on the screen here we have an image of White City roughly today. You can see some of the key developments. So White City and Television Centre are the two projects that Stanhope has been involved with, but we've obviously been working very closely with Imperial, who've developed a number of buildings north and south of the Westway over that time period, and obviously White City Living, which Berkeley Homes have been leading on, and obviously Westfield, which was one of the first buildings to be opened and then expanded laterally in 2012. So just to route you geographically where we are in West London, obviously we've got this amazing model so you can see, but one of the things that was really attractive to us back in 2011 was the speed of connection back to the West End and the city. It's a very fast, it's got 2 tube stations, it's got the train station at Shepherd's Bush, and I think going back to 2011, you kind of got to remember we were all coming out of the great financial crash. There wasn't a lot of investment. Where there was, it was very much focused in the city, and whilst Westfield had opened in White City, we saw an opportunity in White City to do something quite special. This is where we are today. So you can see the 2 parcels on the west side of Wood Lane, being Television Centre and White City Place. The Westfield development and White City Living in Imperial north and south. I think some of the key things to remember here is this is a huge development in London. It's 5 million square feet of offices, leisure and amenity space, and I think that's quite important when you're talking about creating an innovation district. It's got the largest shopping centre in Europe. I mean, every time I go around Westfield, I just think it's normal to get lost in there. 30 acres of public space across the area, over 5,000 new homes, and there may well be some more some of those obviously being built. And very lucky to have this world-class university, Imperial College, which is obviously expanding, growing, building new buildings, and the teaching hospital. Transport we've talked about The one thing I particularly wanted to pick up was we feel it's been a great partnership between ourselves, Imperial College, and the local authority. And back in time, the GLA and the local authority spent, and the BBC, in fact, spent some considerable time putting together the White City opportunity area, which really was the kind of bedrock for a lot of these developments that have come forward over the last 15 years. And LBHF still today really have a very pro-business, pro-economic growth approach to the borough. We were very fortunate to inherit a number of heritage and culture buildings. I mean, working on Television Centre, one of the most iconic buildings I think I've ever been involved with, was pretty special, and we've turned that into something amazing. And the one thing I think is really important in these long-term projects is long-term patient capital, which obviously Imperial have that 150-year view. We also have some investors we work with in Mitsui and Aimco that are able to take a more longer-term view to ride through certain cycles. But going back in time a bit, certainly before my time, it's an image from just around the 1960s. So you can see Television Centre under construction, but to the north of the picture was the former Olympic Stadium, which was actually built in 1908. And on the right-hand side, you can see the one and only time Great Britain was #1 in the medal table for the 1908 Summer Olympics, which is a pretty amazing feat. But today, this is where we are at Television Centre. So we purchased the site in 2012, say 14 acres freehold, so it was a large land parcel. As was mentioned earlier, we also inherited quite a lot of power from the BBC, which was pretty critical. They've been able to take forward the project quickly. Good transport links, heritage buildings. We're fortunate enough to get the BBC as an anchor tenant on 2 of the buildings, the studios and some office space. And we also then led to actually securing Soho House to open a new West London club, who then proceeded to have a gym, cinema, restaurants, and we built over 400 apartments in phase 1 and some office space. Phase 2 is now actually under construction and due to finish next year. At White City Place, a few years later, back in 2015, again we purchased this site from the BBC. This included the 3 large buildings you can see on the screen, plus quite a large area of development land at the front of the site, which in total will deliver about 2 million square feet, and we've probably built 70% of that to date. We refurbished the 3 buildings between 2015 to 2018, and were fortunate enough to let them all in 2017, 2018, actually to a range of different media, fashion, tech, and indeed some life science occupiers. And I think the interesting thing about these buildings is that they were obviously all built by the BBC back in the late 80s and mid-90s, but they had a very robust structure to them. They were able to accommodate, they had good floor-to-ceiling height, so they were able to accommodate the lab specification, but also they had a lot of power coming into the site. So in terms of occupiers today, we have a fast-growing company, Gravity Media, which you may not have heard of, but actually has doubled their floor space with us, but they are the home of broadcast transmission for an awful lot of sports channels across the UK, and it all gets run out of White City. As the BBC is also still there, they have a big transmission base in there as well. We've also recently just done a transaction with Wilby Labs, who are now operating a series of different types of labs, ranging from sort of single desk parties up to companies who have 10, 20 people. So we've got a range of offer in there, and we've just reimagined our co-working offer in the space. And actually, interestingly, due to occupier feedback, we've introduced an affordable 24-hour gym, the Gym Group, which has been amazingly successful. In the wider environment, Stanhope, prides itself on the kind of managing the estates, enlivenment, working with occupiers to have a lot of events across the year, particularly in the summer, bringing entertainment for all the occupiers who live and work on the various campuses. We've delivered some affordable housing in the borough, and also we have a number of community-led initiatives. Here at White City Place, on the left-hand side, there's a kind of range of media, tech, fashion occupiers that occupy the space, but also on the right-hand side, some of the life science occupiers, some of whom who've been there from day one in 2017. So Novartis, one of the largest science companies in the UK, in the world, in fact, took 50,000 space. But also more recently, will be labs coming in to operate labs, Synthase, and obviously even Imperial College has taken some space in one of our buildings else heights, so that's an academic sort of business support unit. So talking about Imperial and local authority in terms of building this innovation district, we've also been working closely over many years with the local authority, with Imperial, and indeed the White City Innovation Districts came out of that approach, working together, which really attempts to pull together all of the activities of the borough, across the borough, but particularly in White City, and the ambitions of Imperial, which obviously they are a science and tech university, and they've got some pretty exciting plans for the area. So this is on the left-hand side is their campus. So you can see how their buildings, all the buildings to the north of the Westway have been constructed. They're now working on their campus to the south of the Westway. On the right-hand side, the sort of purple, they have a building known as Scale Space, which is their kind of startup to scale up space. They have some labs in there. They've also just committed to this building, which will be their AI and quantum computing building, which I think when this opens in, I think it's 2029, it will really put White City on the map in terms of teaching and academic opportunities. There's a little timeline here of our involvement. I think the key thing is here, these innovation districts don't happen overnight. They take a long time. They take patient capital. As I say, we got involved in 2011, but I think a lot of the hard work started in 2008 when Westfield opened. We started with Television Centre. In 2015, we purchased White City Place, and we've been progressively kind of moving through our phase of building. It really had a lot of excitement in 2018-19 when lots of buildings were opening, both on the Imperial College site, but also on our sites. And obviously, unfortunately, COVID hit and everything kind of slowed down a bit. We did manage to start 2 new buildings during COVID. One which had a pre-let to PVH, Calvin Klein, and the second one was a pre-let to L'Oreal, who took one of our bigger buildings on the Gateway sites. And as I say, Imperial have just started their new building. So here's an image of what it could look like in 2035. So a lot of these buildings have been built, but hopefully it gives you a flavour of the kind of scale of development that is happening in White City, particularly around the tube station and the kind of Imperial campus. So in summary, this whole district had its origins in the GLA White City Opportunity Area. I think one of the reasons why it succeeded is there's some large-scale land opportunities here, which is not the case in many areas of London. Both of our sites had significant power, and I know Imperial have put in a new substation to deliver power to their development, which is really important. Even to this day, smaller occupiers demand a lot of power. We had a number of anchor occupiers, which really helps kind of create a space from day one obviously Westfield and Imperial College having their original vision, the transport connections, and it's now emerged, I have to say, back in 2012, we never thought it would be an innovation district. It's actually emerged over time as a very attractive place for those businesses who are active in the innovation system. But we're obviously keen now to kind of support that across a range of different sectors. Obviously, housing affordability is really key, and actually the local authority has a big push on delivering low-cost housing for people to work in the borough, but obviously across London. And finally, I think it's this partnership between ourselves, Imperial, the council, to deliver this with our long-term investors. Thank you.
To join the panel, and Howard to come and join us up here as well, and Nathan Davies, who's Senior Manager for Economic Strategy and Innovation at GLA, is going to join our panel for discussion as well. So thank you, all of you. And I think we've heard, a really positive picture of how our innovation geographies are shifting, the role that London is playing globally in a really leading role. Nathan, I'd be keen to hear from you tell us a bit about how your role at the GLA supports the innovation economy, and then also just give us a little bit of a picture kind of spatially across London where you're seeing those innovation clusters emerging, and kind of particularly over the last year, how you're seeing that shift. Oh, sorry, yes, I need to give you the microphone as well. There you go.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Hello, everyone. So I head up economic strategy and innovation at the GLA. So thinking about what drives growth in London and where future growth is going to come from. And innovation sectors are a especially important side of that in London. And I think in answer to that question, I'd say the starting point is to recognize that innovation has a geography. And there are really sort of three aspects to that. The first is that firms need different things as they grow. Innovation startups can probably start up pretty much anywhere, but pretty quickly they start to need things like talent, capital, infrastructure. And innovation districts are really important because they bring that ecosystem that firms need all together in one place. And usually within innovation districts, we see the presence of an anchor institution, like a big university or a hospital or a research institute, which are really key to helping those firms to prove their technologies in real applications, real live world applications. I think the second aspect is that place can really help ideas to shape and spread. So bringing together people in proximity helps spillovers. So researchers meet companies, investors come across new ideas, and innovation districts can be really crucial in making those connections happen. And that requires really active place leadership. It doesn't happen by accident. It requires real stewardship of that community and that district to make that happen. And transport is also like a really important aspect of helping people to connect as well. And then I'd say the third aspect would be that London needs lots of different innovation districts. The Knowledge Quarter is really kind of, in King's Cross, is really the kind of standout, significant innovation district for Europe. It's where AI and life sciences convergence are coming together with the Crick Institute, and lots of really good rail connections as well. But there are lots of great innovation districts across the capital. We need different ones, whether that's White City in the west, Olympic Park in the east, London Cancer Hub in outer London. But not every place can become an innovation district. It's got to really have the right ingredients in place. But when you have those ingredients in place, that can really help to drive the innovation economy across the whole city, helping us to be more productive and successful.
Thank you. And just as a kind of follow-up question to that, in terms of what we're seeing, particularly we are seeing a lot more focus at the moment in terms of kind of that contraction of the market and perhaps into more of the core. When it comes to the innovation economy, how do you see that kind of inner-outer London relationship, and how do we support that innovation economy to grow much more across the city?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the great thing about the innovation sector is that it's a sector where we're seeing both applications for central London, but also outer London. And lots of you in the room will know that central London is an area where there's very high demand for prime space. So we need to think more about where we can have these innovation companies. And I think the good thing about developments like the White City development that we've heard about, I think we're going to hear about the Olympic Park development later, is that these are finding places in outer London where we can bring really high-value jobs, high-value companies, which is good for communities as well when it's done in the right way. So I think that's a very positive side of how London is growing and growing outwards.
Yeah, and I mean, and Howard, you talked about it as a galaxy of clusters, and that's that strength that London has, is that diversity of those clusters. I wanted to follow up on a point that you made, I suppose, around some of the challenges really ahead for London to deliver the ambition of what we want, you know, where we want to get to. You talked, of course, about power and the, you know, and the moves that are being made there for the, you know, the real challenges that that's causing, particularly in West London. But when it comes to, you know, the housing market, and we know the challenges there at the moment, how does that kind of fit into this picture in terms of how we make sure we're delivering the housing that we need to really support this economy to grow?
Yeah, I think the point that Nathan was making about, you know, it can start from anywhere, is absolutely right. And one of the ways in which that works is really good transport connections, to connect places that people want to live and also can afford to live, with the places where the innovation is happening. Working remotely, working near home, which is a relatively new thing, where you've got some really interesting developments on high streets around outer London where existing buildings typically are being repurposed to provide sort of co-working space, where a lot of quite exciting new businesses coming out of there and then moving to locations centrally. But, you know, where people want to, you know, they started up their business around the kitchen table, they're ready to move into an office, they're ready to collaborate and have meeting room space and so on, but they still want to be able to take the kids to school. And there's no need for them to commute into a central location yet. And that's part of the ecosystem. But you're absolutely right. Housing, cost of housing, availability of housing is a constraint, and we're not going to exercise the reasons why the housing market is doing what it is. We're making real efforts to do what we can at our level to get things moving. We're going to need some interest rate changes really to really get things moving. But there's a housing, there's a transport infrastructure issue, and then there's also looking at where you can put housing onto a site as part of the mix. And obviously that's one of the things happening in White City, is that it's actually got some quite a mix of tenures and price levels of housing around. You need to be able to have the space for the researchers to be close to their research work, for example. There's a lot of things in the innovation space, I mean, labs being the obvious one, that you can't do from home, which require people to physically be in a location. So having either really good transport or on-site opportunity for people to live is part of the mix, yeah.
Yeah, and Jonathan, to kind of follow on from that, I guess, what are you seeing in terms of the occupiers that you're working with, the businesses that you're working with, in terms of how far they're kind of prepared to commute and travel, and how the kind of residential element forms part of the whole mix of what you're developing at White City and other places across the city?
Yeah, well, I think some of the occupiers we've got in White City have moved most of them have moved from within West London. Think of the bigger companies like, say, L'Oreal, who were down in Hammersmith, have moved to a new headquarters. So in terms of I think staying in West London for a lot of those companies was very important. We've always historically struggled to pull occupiers who are in the West End or City out to White City. It's generally been more, well, they're already based in West London, or they're perhaps smaller businesses who definitely live locally and see the attraction of being in perhaps some of our smaller office suites or co-working space to kind of start their business and grow from there.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of the types of housing that you're seeing that's needed to support these employers, I guess kind of where are you seeing the kind of the core need? Is it much more in the kind of, I suppose, kind of key worker category, the family category? There's kind of where do you see that need?
I think it's probably the full range. Obviously, Imperial have got a big program of their own to develop. They've actually developed both housing for their students, but also for their teaching staff. That's one of the taller buildings on their site. Obviously, there's been quite a lot of housing, new apartment buildings, which is a lot of it's targeted at the rental market, which is strong in White City. And obviously, you have the existing White City estates. There's a lot of historic, older London housing, some of which is available to rent or buy, depending on circumstances. So I would say there's quite a varied offer across, within a sort of 1 to 2 miles walk of the site.
Great. And I just wanted to pick up again on something that Howard was talking around this kind of faster movement of space, the kind of faster movement of occupiers from, grow on space up to, kind of this kind of scale up space. What does that mean for you at Stanhope in terms of how you manage that kind of leasing model with those occupiers, and how you kind of manage that asset base of that ability for occupiers to kind of grow on quickly and perhaps move faster than we're seeing in other parts of the office market?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've actually been developing, our history is in doing large buildings to large occupiers on taking 100,000 feet, but actually in White City we've kind of sort of rethought that whole model. So we now have a range of different spaces, ranging from people who can take desks to people who can take rooms that's maybe 5 to 10 people. We then have what we call some small business suites. We also have, we've recently added some space to do companies who need labs in that space. So those sort of 10, 20 people, but not a traditional lease, but a kind of flexible arrangement. And then obviously stepping up to taking 10,000 feet on a lease. And I think in the range of buildings, particularly that we have at White City Place, we've been fortunate. We've been able to allow some companies to grow and thrive and move through different types of spaces. And in fact, we've added another type of space more recently. We've got some what we call fitted spaces where, in that space there's desks, chairs. You can literally move in with your laptop and ready to go, and that can either be or managed or take it as it is. So, and actually that's proving successful with some of the tech banking apps companies we've got moving in here. So, it's a fast moving, but I think in those markets, being able to offer that whole variety of spaces is really important.
Yeah, and being able to offer that all on the same campus, so you have that ability to move people around. And I suppose, Howard, from the perspective of kind of looking at the London picture, of course, there's certain estates like, where Stanhope are able to kind of make those moves and support that build-up. That can work. But I guess, what would you want to kind of see from the development built environment sector at a broader kind of London level to enable that to happen?
Well, I think there are some really good examples, and most of our big innovative developers like Stanhope, actually British Land are doing it, Crown Estate, Lendlease are doing it, Canary Wharf, where I used to work, are doing it, is providing that that lease type arrangement where people can grow from sort of 2 to 20 to 200 to 2,000 people, and flexibly as well, and accommodating people's different needs. So I think the industry is stepping up. What we do need is we need the insurers and the funders to step up, to step up as well, because, and this, across the board. And I should also say, having spent a couple of weeks in California earlier this year, we're stupid at how we talk about London. Americans here would be like, oh my God, we are number one city in the world, we're brilliant at everything, everything's brilliant, oh my God, White City's amazing, Canary Wharf's amazing, Knowledge Quarter's amazing, everything's great. And literally, it's like 99% the positives, and they occasionally, oh yeah, we've got to sort a few things out, but let's concentrate on the good things. And any other city in Europe will be looking at what we've got enviously. And a lot of cities across the US, actually. Mm-hmm. We're in a uniquely positive place. Obviously, the things we need to fix. We always concentrate, particularly us, because we've got to look at the things we need to fix. Concentrate on the things we need to fix. But let's not lose the opportunity to talk things up as well. When you go to your funders and say, we've got this business, they've been in business since December last year, we've just let them 10,000 square feet, they get very nervous. And what they're not seeing always is the opportunity. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you've got long-term patient capital that understand what they're doing, like you've got, great. But for a lot of other developers, they're going to the banks, they're going to the funders, they're going to the insurers, and they're going, really? You're letting 10,000 square feet to a business that only came into existence 6 months ago? Ooh, that's a bit tricky. And it's a 5-year or a 3-year or a 2-year with lots of flexibility in it. It gets priced very differently. Your borrowing costs go up. We've got to get out of that and get into a much more positive view about what the opportunities are. I'm going to shop in a sec, but this gets me wound up. A friend of mine recently did a funding round on his business, which is fintech, and he said he went to UK funders and he went to US funders, and he said the UK funders were all about, when do I get my money back? What's your track record? What's the plans? Show me the numbers. I want to see where this business gives me my return. Whereas the US was all about, what's the opportunity here? Yep. What's the top line? What's the sky? Where are we going in terms of big vision? Where do I make my billions rather than my 10% return? And I'm not saying it's universally bad. There are lots and lots of good things going on, but we need a bit of a mind shift to get into that space of capturing the opportunity rather than, the sort of very conservative with a small c attitude. So that's the crucial bit, is making sure that that we support this sector, and the people who are doing the innovative stuff to support the sector, like Stanhope are. So that's in terms of funding the businesses, but also the support system around the built environment as well.
Yeah, thank you. So, there's a real maturity around that investment sector that's so critical and key to linking this all together. Thank you. That's really, really clear. I want to come to questions in a minute, so do think about what you'd like to ask our panellists. But first, I did want to pick up on the point about how London sits within the national picture. And of course, you talked about this being, it's London, it's Manchester, it's Leeds, it's all of the places across the UK that need to come together. Nathan, I suppose particularly when it comes to kind of how we're thinking about London geographically in that picture, I wonder if you can kind of give us a picture of, I suppose, where the most important geographic clusters sit for London and where we sit within that. Of course, there's been lots of conversation about Oxford-Cambridge corridor and the growth there. Where is London sitting within that at the moment in our planning?
Yeah, well, I think this taps into one of my bugbears, Howard, which is how we talk about London in the UK geography. Because, as Howard was explaining on his trip to San Francisco, the distances that we have in the UK are really quite small. You can get on a train and be in pretty much any other UK city and even get back, within a day. And try doing that in the US, it's really, really, impossible. So for a very dense country, we are very obsessed about regional geography in the UK. And I think in sort of recent years, we've, back to Howard's point about opportunities, we've stopped talking about what's great about London. And what's great about London is it really puts the it puts the global in UK, basically, for a range of different sectors. So I think, across the country, there are a number of other very important life sciences and innovation areas, places like Greater Manchester, West Midlands, Liverpool, but also places like Nottingham, Glasgow. These are all really, really important. They're all strong in different areas. Of course, Oxford and Cambridge, well known for their research excellence. I think some of these areas actually see their proximity to London as a real advantage and a real selling point. I think if there's a kind of a pattern to that sort of geography of innovation that I was talking about before, is typically what we see in London is London will be the place where the innovation team will be based. So places like the Knowledge Quarter have been very successful at securing the innovation teams of very large global companies. But that innovation needs to be scaled up somewhere. It needs to be deployed somewhere. And so those other sort of UK cities are generally the places where that happens, where perhaps the manufacturing takes place if that's involved in the business's product. And I think the other pattern that we see is that, innovation doesn't sort of know a boundary. A business doesn't know a boundary. So we think of the M25 as this really hard stop line after which you exit London and start to be in a different part of the world. But of course, actually, you'll see these sort of corridors of business and economic activity when you sort of map these things out. And that's particularly noticeable in life sciences in terms of the sort of UK, the innovation corridor that runs from London to Cambridge, with lots of places like sort of Stevenage, Harlow, which are within their own rights really important places for life sciences. So there's a real geography there. We're really actually much more interconnected than we think that we are, or that we talk about. And to Howard's point, actually what we should be doing is saying, this is great. We have this really dense cluster of clusters in the UK, which is really good at doing a range of different things. So let's see if we can move that narrative forward together, I think.
And Howard, perhaps just to get your perspective on, of course, nationally there's a huge amount of shift and, going on at that level. I suppose, where is that message being heard? Where does it have the opportunity to kind of come through a bit in all of this?
I've got to look. I'm always accused of being too positive about stuff, but that's kind of my job. Two things I'd say. One at a local level. We've seen a lot of change last week in the local elections, but if you actually look through to the individual people now running boroughs, so I'll give two examples, and we were really quite worried we might lose 4 boroughs to reform, including people who were saying, if we win Bexley, we're going to declare UDI and have a referendum on leaving London, which, would have been an interesting fight to have. But instead, we've ended up with one reform council led by Keith Prince. And Keith Prince, who is now the only person in history to have led 2 London boroughs, who was the Tory leader of Redbridge for a long time, a Tory London Assembly member, is now the reform leader of Havering. Now, absolutely don't agree with reform's policies on a lot of things, but we know Keith Prince. We've worked with Keith Prince a lot in the past. He, again, may be part of a party that believes things, a lot of which we don't believe in, but we've got actually quite a lot in common about, the basics of supporting small businesses, supporting jobs, supporting growth, and so on. Hackney, Zoe Garbett. Again, London Assembly member, we know Zoe Garbett really well. I mean, we've done lots of things with Zoe Garbett on the London Assembly. Her team has already reached out to talk to us about some business stuff. So actually, there may well be differences of opinion on, particularly on some planning things, and that's things we're going to have to work out. But in terms of support for London's growth and jobs and so on, particularly in the context of the green economy, small businesses, high streets, I think there's a lot in common there. And the other thing I'd say is, of course, everyone's interested in the psychodrama at the top of the Labour Party, but if the choice, if this wild choice is between Wes Streeting and Andy Burnham, who are effectively both from the same wing of the Labour Party historically. You know, we aren't talking about a sort of Jeremy Corbyn versus Peter Mandelson type. I'm not allowed to say that anymore, are you? But we're not talking about that sort of, even within the Labour Party. You know, this is a sort of, you know, difference between somebody who's a Blairite with Brownite tendencies and a Brownite with Blairite tendencies. So, but there is an opportunity when there's change for us to make the case for some innovation, particularly in things like devolution. And one of the things that has been quietly going on over the last 2 years is quite a lot of devolution to London, which has been a really good thing. One very quick example on innovation is the government has allocated some of the UKRI budget, research and innovation budget, across the country for mayoral strategic authorities to decide on and allocate. We're working through that process at the moment. We've got some amazing projects. All the indication is that if that's successful, there'll be more of that devolved to a local level, which would be really good stuff. So, you know, one of the good things about us being stable is we can spot the opportunities to push for some new stuff as some of these changes happen.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any questions from our audience? We have a microphone just over here, so if you want to raise your hand if you have a question, and let us know your name and company. Yes, there's one just at the front. If you'd like to come forward a little bit. Yes, just in the blue top over here. And let us know who your question's directed to, or if it's to the whole panel.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you to the panel. It was a really, really interesting discussion. I am Jane Stewart. I come from Harrington Capital's Economic Development team. My question to you, and Howard, you touched on it a little bit then, but what do you see as the role of planning policy, particularly in relation to employment space, in supporting innovation in London?
Well, I'll hand it over to other people. I've talked a lot, but so obviously new London plan's coming out soon. I've got a draft copy in my bag if anyone... No, I haven't. Well, I have actually, but you can't see it. But we started with pro-growth, slimmer plan, not adding any costs to developers, and stepping a little bit out of the things where it's like, where we're a bit being over-specific, and actually it's down to local authorities to take those decisions, but more strategic in terms of particularly, that issue of supporting employment space, hopefully without being too prescriptive. So the principle being that, you know, leaving open the opportunity to for us and for local authorities to jump on things as they happen, without sort of setting things in stone. And I think the lesson of the last 5 years, if you think back to 5 years ago, or even the previous London plan 10 years ago, is that actually the economy and big change to the economy are happening faster than that 5-year sort of planning cycle is able to keep up with. So we need to build in more flexibility. I don't know if either of you want to come in.
Anything?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that this sector that we're talking about, innovation sector, highlights is the need for flexibility, and that's sort of come up a lot here. You know, the technology is moving so quickly that we don't really know what will be the next thing. So a good example of this is like quantum, right? Right now, if you want to fit out a quantum computer, you need basically to do it in a university laboratory. It's that sort of size of thing. But last September, a London-based company, actually managed to create a silicon-based quantum computer that could fit into a large wardrobe size. So the technology is always going to be changing, and I think for developers that's challenging because it requires flexibility. I think within the consultation on the London plan, there was some consideration around use class E and having more sort of flexibility across that, which would be really important. I think another thing which is important across London is you talk a lot about the flight to quality, but not so much what that leaves behind. And what that leaves behind is a very large growing stock of grade B and below commercial buildings. So across the city or within communities or developers and landlords themselves are going to have to think about what we do with those buildings. And, I don't think there's going to be a one size fits all for a city like London. So it's going to require some imagination, some creativity, and some flexibility across the whole geography of London in different places.
Jonathan, anything to add? Particularly, no? Okay. That's fine. Any more questions from the audience? Yes, we've got one just over here, and then we'll come back to this gentleman over here. If you speak up a little bit, and then I think we'll be fine.
Can you hear me okay?
That's great, yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jocelyn Lomer from Nova Enterprises, and it's a very high-tech company, next generation virtual collaboration. My point here is about the process. We were lucky enough to get an Innovate UK grant some years ago, and that takes us to TRL 9, which is, for those who don't know, sort of product ready status. And then the government, having very kindly invested in us, then says bye-bye. What I can assure you is that from TRL 9, that doesn't currently exist, to TRL 20 costs just as much in investment as 0 to 9. So my question to the panel is, how can the public bodies, which constitute roughly half the economy, actually help grant-funded companies get to 20 by actually purchasing the technology, which excites the investors, risk-averse investors, to actually chuck in some money? That's the question. Thank you.
Howard, Nathan, you want to start with that? It builds on your previous point, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And one of the challenges that we've got in London is not creating great companies like yours, but how do we keep those great companies here? Just because the attraction of going to North America and other places where there's lots of finance is very big. We'd like to do a lot more in this space. We have specifically done stuff in this space. So the mayor has for a number of years co-invested alongside private sector VCs through an organization we have called Funding London. So Synthesia, the AI company, we actually invested in that company when it was early stage. And we do that to help to de-risk some of that VC capital. There's only so much that we can do. We've been using European Union funds to do that. We are, Funding London are about to launch a new fund, but I'm going to sort of manage expectations and say this isn't going to, massively change the dynamics of that. But there are national government institutions like the British Business Bank, which are trying to come in and provide more capital to sort of help with exactly what you're talking about. And I think there's also a real opportunity. Howard mentioned the Local Innovation Partnership Fund from UKRI. Now, UKRI spends nearly £2 billion a year in London institutions every year. We don't have a huge amount of input into how that works, but we're working very closely with UKRI and Innovate UK to try and sort of work more strategically together. And I think there's a lot more that we can do there.
Yeah, as a purchaser, the public sector is one of those institutions that's been a little bit slow to take up innovative products and services. I'm very attracted by the way that Singapore does it, where each government department has a fund to invest in new products that might be useful for that department. And they even go as far as, people bring them ideas. not even a business yet, but here's an idea of something that in theory we could do that would help solve a problem you've got, and they'll invest in that and help build a business around it. So a separate funding stream outside of the normal sort of procurement cycle, specifically for innovation. That's something I know that Peter Kyle and Liz Kendall and others in the government have been very attracted to. It's something we've been talking to Patrick Vallance about, and Zabir Ahmed, unfortunately he resigned last week, but he was very much looking at that in the health service, in having a fast track for trying out innovative stuff, and we're trying to do that in London. I mean, one of the first things the mayor did when he got in was appoint Theo Blackwell as Chief Technology Officer, and open up all of our data for innovation, which created things like Citymapper based off our data through TfL. TfL's got a really good team that looks at how they can bring in innovation, both sort of, internally and building on stuff externally, and then also using stuff they've developed to help create businesses that can work elsewhere. So it's hugely important. We don't do enough of it, and happy to talk to you afterwards if you want.
Thank you very much for the question. We've got time just for one more question. Gentleman at the back.
Councillor John Bevan, Harringay Council. You mentioned about devolution to the mayors, which is UK-wide, but specifically for London as well. And I know that Lime Bikes are really cheesed off with having to talk to 32 different councils about the way their Lime Bike system operates. And I know they've been talking to the Mayor of London about getting a London-wide common standard that they can apply everywhere. So how do you think devolution will help in getting some more common standards across the whole of London?
Question for you there, Howard, I think.
So there's two things here. One is, if you were going to design a political system to run London, you wouldn't start by saying, let's split it up into 33 different boroughs and run most stuff that way. Nor would you say, let's have one mayor that controls everything. So there's a bit of dynamic tension going on between what's devolved to us, and then also what actually we do jointly across London. You're right. Things like Lime Bikes, things like electrical charging points for vehicles. Some of those things we really need to get a common standard across London and stick to it. If we can get all the boroughs around the table to agree one. And some of the things which are actually done at a national level really shouldn't be. I mean, one that we're talking to the government about at the moment is just simple things like careers and advice for people in terms of getting into these sort of businesses. We control a bit now of the adult education system. We have a little bit of input into 16 to 19 skills. Weirdly, we've got more say in careers for 16 to 19-year-olds, even though we don't actually run 16 to 19-year-old education, than we've got for adult careers. So there's a few things like that where, we are, like I said, we're in part of a process. But I think there may be an opportunity on some of these things where, particularly on the sort of the green agenda, where there's things we've been trying to do as a city and where we've got clear targets, where actually we can probably push a bit further now. And we will do that.
Thank you. Now I'm conscious we're just getting into your coffee break, so I just wanted to ask you each a really quick kind of closing question around where you see over the next 5 years the kind of really big opportunities for the built environment sector to respond to. So give me one kind of big opportunity that you see coming forward that we can grasp as a sector.
I think what we're seeing across our projects, London and South East, is perhaps a slight pivot away from lab-enabled buildings, which was kind of the big thing in certain locations, towards the occupiers who might occupy those buildings are actually more tech and AI focused, and actually they still come with specific requirements, particularly around power, but the specification is not that of a lab, and I think that's where we're spending a lot of time thinking about how do we best develop flexible buildings that can meet that demand that we think is going to be there, but is not quite there at the moment yet.
Yeah. Thank you. Howard?
I would say flexibility is going to be the key, and taking a long-term view with short-term flexibility built into it is going to be the crucial bit. We are confident that the city will continue to grow. We're growing faster than the rest of the UK. We are aiming to have another £100 billion in the economy 10 years from now. There's a lot of things changing. And there's a lot of moving parts in that. But you would, if you were looking from the outside in, you'd bet on London. So I would say bet on London.
Thanks. I mean, I would mention Euston, just because I think that is going to be a massive opportunity, probably one of the biggest development sites in Europe, with HS2 coming in, and lots of innovation activity around there. But I think sort of looking across the whole city is just see what's happening with AI right now and how that's really kind of shaping demand for space in London. And now look at some of these things which are starting to make their way from the laboratory into actual real markets, whether that's things like quantum or engineering biology. There's some really exciting science happening in London, and whether it's places in sort of, those areas around big train stations or industrial estates in sort of other parts of London, in outer London, there's going to be a lot of science-based business in London in its next decade. I'm really 100% certain of that.
Great, thank you very much. I think there's been such a kind of clear, positive, optimistic call around what's happening in London and here. Of course, many of us are heading up to UK Reef this week, where there's a real opportunity to have that much more kind of UK-wide collaboration and conversation. And I think, we can all go with that confidence around what London has to offer in this space and its, kind of global role when it comes to that UK picture. Just after this session, we're going to come back for a bit more of an in-depth look into 3 innovation clusters in Sutton, Paddington and the Queen Elizabeth Park as well. So we'll break for coffee here and come back at 11 o'clock. But let's please give our speakers a really big round of applause for what's been a really fascinating conversation. Welcome back, everyone. If you'd like to take your seats so we can start for the second half of the conference. So our first session, we had a really fascinating conversation around the kind of big picture for London, where it stands at the moment. This session, we're going to be focusing in a little bit more detail on 3 key innovation districts that are evolving and really kind of looking at the structures, the mechanisms that are sitting behind them to make them successful and to kind of take them into the future. So we're going to be hearing from the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, from Paddington Life Sciences Hub, and the London Cancer Hub Life Science Cluster in Sutton as well. So to kick us off, we're going to start with Francesca Colica, Head of Innovation at the LLDC. So we can give her a round of applause to welcome her up.
Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see you, lovely to be here. Thank you to the NLA for having me. It's my last moment in the sun before I pop and give birth to a new human in a few weeks' time, so really appreciate it. And I've also joined the expert panel on innovation districts, which I'm looking forward to developing some interesting concepts the next few months, maybe after this little one comes out. So the core message that I'm going to present to you today builds off of Nathan's second point that he made earlier around place leadership. I work at the London Legacy Development Corporation. For those of you that don't know, we're a mayoral development corporation. We answer to the Mayor of London. We have been responsible for the planning, development, infrastructure, housing, transport, and inward investment into the Olympic Park, post-Olympics, post-2012. The core proposition that I want to land with you and idea, key message in this presentation is that with innovation districts, I'd like us to move away from thinking about innovation districts as property models and think about more innovation districts as operating systems. So let that sit with you in your brain for a little bit. The last decade, I think cities, developers, universities have really tried to build innovation districts by concentrating assets, universities, labs, startups, workspace, investment. We absolutely should do that, and that is the right thing to do in innovation districts. But proximity alone doesn't guarantee innovation. So it certainly doesn't guarantee impact or economic growth. So that's the core proposition that I'm landing. The real challenge now, moving forward from 2026, isn't creating clusters, at least not in London. We don't have that problem, other parts of the country maybe. But it's really creating systems in those places that accelerate collaboration, that lead to actual adoption of innovation. So innovation that goes into the market and changes the way that we live, changes the way that Londoners experience London. And the rest of the economy. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we're thinking about this at the Olympic Park. We haven't nailed it. We don't have the answer, but I'll let you in on what we're thinking. But it's not a campus. It's not a property development at the Olympic Park. It is a sub-regional innovation ecosystem we're trying to create across the place. So if I do the typical transformation piece with lovely images. I've explained who the LLDC is, what our core job has been, which is ultimately about social and economic transformation. But for those that don't remember, these are some photos of what it looked like when we took on the site from 2012, just before 2012, and the pre-Olympic period. Of course, innovation in the East End and the Lower Lee Valley doesn't start from 2012 when we started building this new bit of city in the Metropolitan District. It's got a really rich history of industrial scale innovation, social, political change is part of the DNA of the place. The first plastics were invented in the Lower Lee Valley. The first IPA brewed there. First airplane that flew in the UK flew in the Lower Lee Valley. Suffragette movement, the labor movement had a really strong history there. But at least where the LLDC started, or the Olympic Delivery Authority started, this is what it looked like. And then today, here we are, a new metropolitan district with a real kind of blend of, across our patch, of parks, wild spaces, waterways, rivers, canals, business districts, retail. We have the busiest shopping center in Europe, 1 million a week visiting Westfield. 5 new neighborhoods, 33,000 homes by the time we'll be done in a few years' time. 45% of those across the portfolio affordable. 11 universities now on the park. UCL the biggest, but also Teesside and Staffordshire have outposts there. And of course, the Olympic venues, schools, health centers. We've built quite a lot, as some of you will know. And in the surrounding neighborhood, 1.2 million people in our hood. So. What's inside all this just captures a little bit of what I've said. Ultimately, so 560 acres across the piece. And has been named as one of the thriving innovation districts in the mayor's growth plan that we heard about earlier. Excuse me. So under the lid of all this and all these different features and assets of the district, 40,000 jobs on the park itself, 18,000 more in the local supply chain in the sub-region, and then a further 26,500 jobs beyond into the UK economy. So this is a really highly productive cluster, and one of the reasons why it was recognized as an innovation district for London. But it's also got, some of the fastest, most entrepreneurial population in the country, fast startup rates, also high failure of startups. But lots of partnerships between the actors in this district, which generate further investment in R&D and community investment. So quite a unique blend of things going on here. It's not a med cluster, a life sciences cluster. It's not a climate tech cluster. It doesn't have a particular flavor. It is really a blend of cultural, creative, digital, AI, climate, yes, but a real mix of sectors that are emerging on the park. But, big but, there is still a sense and a very real reality that there are persistent, sticky issues in the sub-region. You have massive inequality, so some of the richest parts of the country, as well as some of the poorest parts of the country. So the best quality housing and excellent BREEAM standards, and some of the worst quality housing, and some of the poorest health indicators still. So all this investment, innovation, growth happening on the Olympic Park and the surrounding, but it's this question we are still asking ourselves is, after all these assets have been built and all this amazing change has happened, how are we really driving benefit for Londoners in our immediate neighborhood and wider? How are we making sure that people are accessing jobs, skills, training, opportunities? How are those innovations that are happening in UCL, in the Bartlett, translating into our local neighborhoods? These are the questions that we're asking. So the LLDC, yes, it's still going. We're in our kind of third phase of life, and we've got this kind of renewed purpose around driving inclusive growth with what we've built so far. And that is at the heart, that public service mission is at the heart of what we're trying to achieve the next 5 years. And we're kind of organizing ourselves and our ecosystem of partners, those universities, those community organizations, those corporates, those startups, to try and mobilize around some key themes. So continuing to transform the habitat, the place we live in, the physical environment, but also the built environment, the natural environment, and our ways of working, collaborating together. Driving talent pipelines, so both skills, jobs, opportunities, as well as enterprise. And then health is a new one for us, and health is, I know, high on the NLA agenda, and agenda for a lot of people in London thinking about innovation in health and how we can use the assets of the park, the biodiverse parklands, the Olympic venues that are outstanding, as well as our partnerships with NHS and so on, to really transform the local area's health and well-being. So this map or the image on the right tries to give, it's not that clear here, but give you a sense of the different, how we're trying to think, pulling together these different elements to tackle some big issues. So the three kind of shifts that I'd like you to consider as to my kind of original core proposition, that we need to be thinking about moving from this idea of co-locating assets and different features of an innovation district to how do we orchestrate them? How do we bring them together? How do we get partners collaborating on some key issues? Not everything, and we shouldn't control what big tenants and landowners do, but there are key things that we can leverage from different parties like universities, like corporates, to collaborate on key projects. How could we orchestrate this ecosystem a little bit? Moving from thinking about isolated innovation and kind of different sectors and their kind of individual focus, and integrating some of those a little bit better. And then moving from innovation outputs. Yes, it's good to have unicorns. Yes, it's good to have good GVA, but actually, what does that mean for Londoners and for citizens, consumers? How are we translating some of the innovation that's happening in place to the place and its economy? So these are the things that we are thinking about. So I'd like to just give you a few examples, really lightly, quickly, about how we've kind of implemented what I've just proposed. So East Bank, hopefully you've heard, you've seen, you've been really proud about this project. Of course, it's the key kind of cultural and educational corner of the park, right at the heart, actually. The key point about this project is that since 2014, I would say, a good 12 years before doors open, and these buildings are open for business, we've been making the case about the potential for clustering world-class education and cultural organizations together, encouraging collaboration between them and encouraging collaboration between local organizations, and asking really hard questions about what it means to generate wider social and economic and environmental benefit. So that by the time doors open in 2026, there's been this long history of community investment programs, school programs, training programs, enterprise programs, hundreds of startups been supported, whole fashion district created with satellite spaces around the region. 5,000 young people have benefited from employment opportunities and training opportunities. So that kind of thinking about orchestration and innovation into delivery has been going on for 10 years before the doors open of these fantastic institutions. The Future Industries Demonstrator is another example of a more recent project where we've really tried to establish the Olympic Park as a test bed for innovation, so startup focused, but really we've worked with 250 SMEs, mostly in climate tech in the built environment, and with 40 specifically to use the park as a test bed for innovation. So getting their products, services implemented with partners like Lend-Lease, Poplarharka, London Borough Waltham Forest, getting new building materials, mold and damp sensors, drones, surveying old housing stock, and coordinating that across the region. So really exciting program, and we're hoping to elevate that idea of the park as a test bed into a park as a district-wide demonstrator through the Adoption Lab, which is a future project coming up. And Howard and Nathan mentioned this earlier, but in the city innovation strategy, which is going to be forthcoming soon, we're hoping to really see a focus on public service transformation and the agenda of modernization and digitization. And what we're thinking now at the Olympic Park is how do we really mobilize the power of the ecosystem to address public service challenges? So the adoption problem is this idea that the UK is amazing at supporting innovation. Invention is big here. Lots of ideas are seeded in the UK, but when it comes to adopting ideas, they come against barriers. So the demand side is finding it tricky to buy innovation. There are procurement issues, legal issues, risk, cultural, workforce skills, et cetera, that mean that particularly public services have trouble adopting innovation. We'd love to work with our public, private, academic colleagues on the park to tackle some big public service challenges on a regional level. So we're kind of mobilizing our attention on that. And finally, one other project to point to, the Retrofit and Climate Tech Academy, which is an example of us as landowner trying to use some interim use land in one of our housing developments at Pudding Mill Lane to set up a retrofit academy. So retrofit and climate tech for the built environment. We'll be looking to train about 1,500 people a year in Fabric's first approach, but then moving into data digital, and as well as community and cultural skills, resident engagement skills, to really tackle and get on board with that agenda in terms of warmer homes and commercial retrofit across the capital. So working with our partners, Vistry Group and the Skills Center to do that, amongst others, tech providers to launch this. Hopefully by the end of next year, you'll see this at Pudding Mill Lane next to the ABBA arena. So to close, this idea of a kind of next generation of innovation districts, really, again, not just thinking about amenities and proximity, but the systemizing of the innovation district, how it operates together, how partners work together on some key problems where they each bring different strengths. So moving from co-location to this orchestration idea, moving from kind of sectoral focus and innovation to integration. That interdisciplinarity is really important. And then moving from individual outputs institutions and organizations might be delivering to real-world outcomes. What does an innovation district do for its region is really the heart of what I wanted to leave you with. So thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Do you want to take a seat at the front and then? Thank you so much. Well, we're going to move on from there to the Paddington Life Sciences Hub. And we have Gavin Henderson, who's the Principal Director at Stanton Williams, here to present. So let's give him a round of applause as he comes up.
So, good morning, everyone. That was an amazing presentation by Francesca, which really filled in so much of the big picture that it was quite incredible. What I'm going to do is focus down now really to the scale of an individual building, which is the Fleming Centre, but it's a building that is very much at the heart of the Paddington Life Science Hub. And a catalyst for its future development. And it's also a project that I think demonstrates the importance of scalability from a local centre and local impacts to global impacts, which is a key part of what I'm going to talk about. It's a project with a quite remarkable ambition, which is important for our society as a whole. So before I actually talk about what we're doing, I'm going to touch very briefly on why we're doing it. And I think starting here, 1928, Alexander Fleming discovers penicillin at St Mary's Hospital in Paddington. It really is a discovery that changes the whole world, and thankfully, I think most of us would struggle to imagine a world without antibiotics where any serious infection has the risk of fatality. But the point about this project is that that is the world that we are drifting back towards, really through the misuse of antibiotics and antimicrobials, not just in healthcare, but also in agriculture, and the lack of investment in research and development of new drugs in this field. So it's to tackle that crisis that the Fleming Initiative has been set up, combining breakthrough science, global policy initiatives, that's at governmental and UN scale, and behavior change. So this is an issue, a global crisis, and I think that's a term that's used an awful lot, but this is a global crisis that is largely invisible. And it's something that is not just tackled through the science, but requires societal change. So at the heart of that global initiative is the Fleming Centre, right here in London, in Paddington, a stone's throw from where penicillin was discovered. So our site, you can see on the plan, is that thin sliver of yellow, and the red outline is the broader St Mary's master plan area. So it's an incredibly well-connected site, right next to Paddington Station, in fact, right on top of the Circle Line, which is an interesting design issue in itself. And it's incredibly central in London, and we've heard the importance of location in previous talks this morning. And it's part of that ecosystem of St Mary's Hospital, Imperial, and the broader Paddington Life Science Hub. We've got an incredible brief. It is very much about driving the highest levels of world-class science and research. But I think more importantly than that, fundamentally, it's about creating somewhere that brings people together, that's scientists, clinicians, policymakers, and members of the public, to drive a wider conversation, to actually encourage and support the interaction and exchange of ideas that creates new ways of thinking. And I think underpinning that, there are three issues that we identified that also are fundamental to the way we approach projects and our work. The first is about public engagement, interaction and involvement. This is actually our project for the Zayed Centre for Research at Great Ormond Street Hospital, which was about giving research and treatment a public face, part of our everyday urban lives. And we think that's incredibly important in a world that is increasingly dominated by discussions about vaccine hesitancy and general skepticism about science and healthcare. So that's part of the brief, as is very much this direct sense of engaging members of the public with what's going on in the building. Here, this was in our project for the Millennium Seatback. I think, secondly, facilitating that interaction and exchange. This is our Sainsbury Laboratory for the University of Cambridge, which won the Sterling Prize really for how it reimagined a research institute around its spaces for collaboration, interaction, and sociability. And it's these kind of spaces that are at the heart of what we're trying to do at the Fleming Centre. And then finally, the idea of building on the past and looking to the future. Both intellectually, it's a project that builds directly on the work of Alexander Fleming, but also physically in incorporating the building you see here, which is known as the Bays, really with the intention of grounding the new institution in the collective memory of the local community. It's a much-loved building. It's one of the last legacies of Paddington's canal side industry, and it's one of the few buildings that Alexander Fleming would have recognized. I think, this is a key issue, how, when we're working in these new districts, how do we create these new environments whilst embracing the experience of the people who are already there? And that's part of why we decided to actually keep this building. So that heritage is important. We're preserving the external walls and historic features of this building, but equally it's a project that's about transformation, quite radical transformation. It's about opening up, letting the public in. This is the new entrance of the building, and from here the public enter the Fleming Discovery Centre, which is a public exhibition area, free to visit, conceived very much as an extension of the public realm. It's a double height space, so you get a sense of that historic building all around you. And you get views, in and out of the laboratory spaces from the public areas, much as we did at the Millennium Seed Bank. So that Fleming Discovery Centre occupies the 2 floors of the historic building. And then above that, we have clinical and research space. This is a section through the resulting building. It's a remarkably slender building. It's only 10 meters wide, which is rather wonderful. The canal in this image is on the right-hand side, and you can see it's almost a layer cake of different activities, which in a way expresses the number of different things we're trying to bring together at this point. The collaborative spaces, like those ones in the Sainsbury Laboratory, are all on the right-hand side of the section overlooking the canal, and they connect a number of different, much more technical spaces. So we have laboratories, we have clean rooms, we have a medical daycare unit for clinical trials, but we also have multiple convening spaces. So these are very much about those conversations amongst global stakeholders that are going to be brought together in this building to drive policy change across the world. So that's a sort of summary of what's happening within the building. It needs to have a physical presence that sits within the wider, very changing, evolving context. So the scale of this building, which is, as you can see, dramatically increased, actually remains quite small compared with the emerging context around it. So it needs to have a visual impact. We're seeing the clinical and research spaces as a lighter weight volume sitting on the brick base and clad with a veil of perforated metal that is illuminated behind for nighttime impact. And that gives the building both a sculptural and very textural facade and forms the termination of Paddington Basin. And the materiality of that is also about relating to the industrial buildings that originally sat along this part of the canal. So that veil provides solar screening and privacy to some of the spaces and activities that are within the building. It also allows us to reveal or conceal different activities. So the projecting volume you see here is another one of those convening spaces that relates back to the hospital at the other end of the canal. And then, of course, we have this remarkable canal side location and the potential to have a building with real impact with this reflection within the canal setting. So that's one part of Paddington Life Sciences. It's the first part to come on board in terms of the future developments that are coming forward on the master plan. And of course, to go back to 1928, it might not have escaped your notice that we're approaching 2028. We have just received planning permission in a unanimous decision from Westminster Council, and we will be opening towards the end of 2028 as a catalyst really for the future development of this area. So I'm going to stop there. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And so our final presentation of this session is from Elizabeth Harris, who's the Head of Economic Growth at the London Borough of Sutton. She's going to be talking about the London Cancer Hub Life Sciences Cluster. So over to you.
In creating a life science district. So this is the London Cancer Hub in Sutton, South London. It's a 21-hectare district, and it's already a leading cancer research and treatment centre across Europe. And our ambition is to become the global home of oncology. So the thing that makes the London Cancer Hub unique is that we have a bench-to-bedside approach where we're testing, researching drugs and testing them and rolling them out all in one district. So we've got multiple landowners across the London Cancer Hub, and the partnership that we have there and the partnership we're growing is what makes it a success. So the Royal Marsden has been based on the London Cancer Hub since the 1960s. And across both of its London sites, it treats almost 60,000 patients a year, so it's working at scale. It's the largest comprehensive cancer centre and is an outstanding rating. I think everybody knows the Royal Marsden. Most people know somebody who've been treated there, and it has a real impact locally. And when you talk to residents, they really understand, it's something that they really recognise and they feel pride that we have within the borough. So they have a number of different buildings on campus at different sort of stages that they've been built. So they have some original hospital buildings, which are probably in need of a refurb now, but they also have some fantastic new buildings as well. So pictured here is the Oak Cancer Centre, which was opened in 2023. And what's unique about this building is it brings together researchers alongside the clinical aspect as well. So it houses 400 researchers, and patients also access this building as well. So the impact of this means that people can get an earlier cancer diagnosis, they receive high quality care, and it's furthering research because you're bringing all of that together in a collaborative way. So also based on the London Cancer Hub, we have the Institute of Cancer Research, which has been here since the 1950s. So the Institute of Cancer Research is world leading in the cancer research it undertakes, and it's also a college of the University of London, so it's training people within the field as well and providing that education. So again, they have multiple districts across the London Cancer Hub, and this is their newest building, which is the Centre for Cancer Drug Discovery. So this is really important in the development of the London Cancer Hub, and for the first time, this building meant that the ICR could consolidate all of their drug discovery groups within one building, and they could support collaboration. So by doing that in this high quality building, it's enabled them to do more collaboration and further their research. So they've brought together people like the Centre for Evolution in Cancer under the same roof. So they're providing that ecosystem and that collaboration between different disciplines within the ICR within one building as well. The ICR is hugely successful in what it does, and the new buildings which are being developed on the site are enabling them to further that research along with their partnership with the Royal Marsden. So their drug discovery teams have discovered 21 drug candidates in the past 20 years, and 13 of those have reached clinical trials. So they're one of the world-leading academic drug discovery groups. And this is just some of the recent headlines. They're in the press all the time with what they've with their discoveries, and there might be ones that you've heard of, like abiraterone was one of their discoveries, which treats prostate cancer and has been hugely successful. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about how Sutton Council got more involved in the London Cancer Hub and how we're supporting its further development. So in 2014, the council took the decision to purchase around 5 hectares of redundant land from Epsom and St Helier Hospital. So you can see it's around this area of the London Cancer Hub, and it was no longer required by the hospital. It had very low density buildings, they weren't fit for modern purposes, and that included for life science as well as for the healthcare purposes either. So they were selling that land, and we wanted to buy it because we were so proud of what was happening within the borough through the Institute of Cancer Research and the Royal Marsden, and the council wanted to work with those partners and develop that specialism to create more jobs and more businesses within the borough, rather than the land being sold and used for residential. So we knew it would bring national benefits as well in terms of furthering cancer research, and it really worked from a local perspective as well. So initially, we worked with the partners to develop the vision for the London Cancer Hub. So we worked alongside the Royal Marsden and the Institute of Cancer Research to make sure that this would meet their needs as well. So the Cancer Hub really worked from the ICR's perspective too. It meant that they could grow their industry partnerships by attracting businesses onto the London Cancer Hub within a wide range of fields, so that they could work alongside those. And through supporting additional commercial development on the site, it also meant that spin-outs from the ICR or other academic institutions could come to be based on the London Cancer Hub as well, so that you would get that multidisciplinary research environment that was taking place. So we purchased the land, we developed the vision, we made sure the land was allocated within the local plan for this usage, and we worked with partners to create a development framework. And throughout the years, we've also worked with Epsom and St Helier, who did retain, they're the NHS Trust, and they retained a small parcel of land so that they could build a new acute hospital, which would further that treatment side of the site because it would provide critical care for people receiving support through the Royal Marsden. So one of the first things we did as well was to create a new school building on the site. So we built the Harris Academy School on the edge of the London Cancer Hub, and this brings educational uses onto the site, and in future will create those pathways through from secondary education through into the jobs which will be created. So this was the first passive house secondary school within the UK and has a growing STEM focus as well. And since it opened in 2019, there's been pupils moving up through the school, so it's now up to full capacity as well. So the council also developed a proof of concept building on the London Cancer Hub, working with the Institute of Cancer Research. So this was one of the old hospital buildings. It was temporarily used as a school whilst the Harris Academy was being built. And then it was converted by us in partnership with the Institute of Cancer Research into the Innovation Gateway. So this was proving the concept that businesses would want to come to locate within Sutton and be based on the London Cancer Hub site. And it would test those partnerships with the other partners on site, like the Institute of Cancer Research and the Royal Marsden. So we opened this in late 2021, and it's currently home to 6 businesses focused on oncology across different areas. And I think it was interesting earlier hearing about that need for businesses to have the access to space where they could scale up and scale back down again. And we're seeing that some of that's working through in practice with businesses, and their needs are changing. So at the moment, that's being met through the Innovation Gateway space, but we also have future opportunities as well with the growth of the rest of the London Cancer Hub that they can hopefully move into space elsewhere on the site. And ultimately, once the London Cancer Hub reaches full development, this building would be demolished and would be redeveloped, but by that time we would have other incubator space. So from the local authority point of view, we also knew that one of the key things the London Cancer Hub needed was transport. So we needed to make sure that the talent could reach the London Cancer Hub, so it would be an attractive place for businesses, and that businesses would choose it because they could easily access the site. So we secured funding through the Levelling Up Fund to double train frequency at nearby Belmont Station. So it was currently only served by 2 trains an hour, and we're increasing that to 4 trains an hour within a couple of years so that people can easily access the site. And we've also got Sutton Station nearby. I think other people have said in their presentations how amazingly connected their sites are and the incredible transport links. That's not something that we can say in Sutton, but we are doing things to address that. And given it's only a mile away from Sutton Station, there are transport links there to multiple central London stations and within the sub-region as well. So we knew that the Sutton Council wasn't the best place partner to take forward development of the London Cancer Hub. We need to do development of around 5 hectares. We needed a partner who had the capital and the expertise to take forward that commercial development. So we explored options over the years, and then we undertook a sales process to identify the right partners to take forward this development. And in late 2023, we agreed a long leasehold sale to Aviva Capital Partners, who are working with Socius on the development of the site, and Populate, who are supporting the ecosystem and the estate in the longer term, who are the sister company of Socius. So earlier it was mentioned around having patient capital. I think that's Aviva's involvement is really beneficial for us and brings a huge amount to the London Cancer Hub. And it's been a really strong partnership as well with Aviva and Socius and Populate. Even though it's a land sale, we've continued to work very closely with them right across the council. So from the economic growth point of view, along with planning, highways, our comms and engagement side, because we've got a lot of pride of what's happening at the London Cancer Hub, and we want to do what we can as a local authority to support that development. So after we agreed to the sale, they started to develop their planning permission, and in February 2026, they secured hybrid planning permission. So they're going to be creating around 1 million square foot of state-of-the-art research and laboratory space at the London Cancer Hub over the coming years. So these are just some visuals of the buildings that they will create. So they're starting with incubator suites for startup and small life sciences companies, and also a welcome pavilion. So that houses a learning lab to bring people into the site and to support that collaboration between people who are based on the London Cancer Hub. And then the next building has got accelerator suites. So as businesses grow and their needs change, they can access that grow-on space as well. So we know that one of the things we need to do is to attract businesses and attract people to come and work within the London Cancer Hub. And that's not just providing the right buildings, it's also the right site and the right district and campus as well. So alongside high quality buildings, Aviva and Socius are also looking at that environment across the Cancer Hub. We've got multiple land ownership, but we want people to come onto the London Cancer Hub and feel like they're on one district and it's unified. They can find their way around the site. It's a pleasant environment to visit, and there's things for them to do as well that makes it the sort of attractive place for them to come to work there or to base their business there. So there's already been an impact through things like Meanwhile paddle courts, which have been created, which are seeing people from across the London Cancer Hub come to use those, and it's creating that collaboration within organisations and between them as well, and it's showing the facilities which are needed in the longer term to make it an attractive environment. And we're not doing this in isolation within the London Cancer Hub either. We've got fantastic businesses based on the London Cancer Hub, and that will be growing over the coming years, but it doesn't operate in isolation in Sutton. We're working across South London, and the strong partnership that we have there, it's a fantastic place to live, but we've also got some amazing research institutions and businesses based there. And we've got a recently formed South London Colleges and Universities partnership, where the partners shown have signed a memorandum of understanding to work together and collaborate on opportunities across South London. So that includes the Institute of Cancer Research, and we have access into those partners as well and have worked with them over a number of years. And we're really ambitious for what South London can achieve. So we're really excited about the development of the London Cancer Hub. I think I've put my details up here, so if you did ever want to come to visit and find out more, you're very welcome to get in touch with me as well. Even though this has been a long-term project, it's taken over a decade to get to this stage. We've now got planning in place, and the development's going to take a few more years until we've got the first buildings up as well. So it's a really exciting stage for us. But we'd love to welcome you down if you want to come to have a look. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. 3 absolutely fantastic case studies, quite diverse in their scale as well. If I can invite our panellists to come and join us on the stage, and we also have Olaide Obu, who's the Managing Director of Populate and Executive Director at Socius, who was introduced just in that presentation there as well to join us. So thank you so much for being here. So we've got a good idea of where you're working. Obviously, you're working in Sutton with the team there. Can you perhaps just give us a sense of the work that you're doing there, what it was, I suppose, that have attracted Aviva and Socius to Sutton and to this opportunity here? And there's been quite a conversation around place leadership. I'd love to hear your view on where that you see that place leadership coming from as this campus evolves. I did that last time as well. There you go.
Thank you for that, Catherine. Socius Populate. Socius is a developer. Populate is a place, we call ourselves place enablers. And we went into partnership with Aviva because of this fantastic opportunity in Sutton. And I suppose for us, we were attracted to London Cancer Hub because it wasn't just about real estate. Our starting point is usually real estate, but the opportunity, we saw it as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to really bring research, treatment, community, and also investment into a single mission. It was all about oncology and cancer treatment and cancer drug discovery, which is a bit of a pivot for us as developers, but for us, I think we were all really enthused by this amazing opportunity. And I suppose if I could talk about the real estate a bit, and Elizabeth has talked about that a little bit, but it's 1 million square feet. Sutton had done lots of the groundwork already, and we got consent in February after almost 2 years of consulting with residents, patient groups, families of patients, people going through cancer treatment, nurses, practitioners, clinicians. We spoke to a lot of people and listened also to a lot of them about the types of spaces that they envisage that they want to be in. And the outcome of that was 1 million square feet, as Elizabeth showed some of the images earlier on, of flexible space that can accommodate research spaces for things like clinical trials, but also the important amenities that a place needs. And we have a children's nursery on site where we'll have paddle courts and other types of physical activity amenities. We're going to bring forward some key worker housing, which was a huge need that lots of the practitioners told us about. Completely affordable housing. But actually, I suppose what Socius and Populate bring to it, and I just answer the second part of your question, was that conviction that science isn't just about the buildings, because we do get fixated with the labs and the spaces for the science to happen. But importantly, the people who are the practitioners of the science also need great places. And as we're at an innovation conference today, for us, innovation isn't just about taking a lease and going into your office or your lab or your flexible space. Fundamentally, it's about, for our role, we see our role as the curator of that place. Mm-hmm. And that place is not just the labs and the offices. It really is about where's the sticky spaces, where do people collaborate? And a lot of things that the scientists told us was science doesn't happen in a lab. And as developers of lab spaces, we were like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, where does it happen? Well, it happens in a pub, and actually it gets translated in the lab. So for us, where are those spaces that enable that collision, that enable that, discussions and debates and conversations to happen, so that you can figure out if you're doing something interesting and someone else is doing something interesting, and you naturally bump into each other and have those conversations. So for us, a lot of our work is about creating those spaces. Where are the pubs? Where's the paddle courts? Where's the social spaces? Where are the places that people genuinely want to be in? And how do we make sure that we are front-loading those now, which is what we're doing. Populate's really focused on now, before the long-term buildings come on board, and taking lots of those learnings into those long-term buildings. So I think for us, we're attracted by the fact that it wasn't just about real estate, and what's keeping us there is that real opportunity to enable that collision to happen, because that's where the real science and the real magic happens.
Yeah, and I suppose, it's been so interesting hearing from different scales about how this is happening. Obviously, we heard from Stanhope earlier about how they're doing that. This really requires that long-term patent capital, doesn't it? It requires that long-term approach. If you don't have that upfront investment, that long-term thinking, this is a very difficult thing to do. Is there any other model in which it can happen, or is that really the sort of...
Look, I think we are very fortunate that when we went into this with Aviva, they have that long-term approach in terms of investment. But I think irrespective of the investment, you do have to have a long-term approach. We are working with partners like the council who are going to be there for decades and decades. The other two major partners, Institute for Cancer Research and Royal Marsden Hospital, have been there for hundreds of years. So I think having that long-term approach and not thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow, really, and setting up the right structures and partnerships to enable that to happen. So we stepped into an environment where the partnership's already there. So our job now, and I think this previous speaker, when LLDC articulated that so well about we've got to create the right systems and processes for that to happen long term. We can't just expect it because we're all co-located that we are going to collaborate or innovation is going to happen. The systems and the governance and the structures need to happen. And thinking about that from a long-term perspective means that you can, then the day-to-day becomes much, much easier.
Yeah, thank you. And Gavin, I wanted to ask a bit about the sort of structure that sits behind this incredible building that sits within that Paddington campus. Of course, it requires real partnership to enable that to happen as well. So I'd be keen to sort of hear a little bit about how that's supported this to come forward. But also, we've had quite a discussion around how you build that long-term impact for the place around you. I suppose, how do you see that engagement with the very local community kind of really getting the benefit of this building coming forward?
Yes, it is a scheme that is all about partnerships. We often talk about enjoying working for multi-headed clients, but we have multiple clients on this. We're employed by the Imperial College Healthcare NHS Trust, but Imperial are a key player, and obviously it's going to be the Fleming Initiative that are occupying the building. And they're already doing vital work right across the world, so they have partners in American universities, in China, in Africa, because none of this is going to happen just from one very small building, or quite small building. It exists as part of this broader ecosystem locally across London and internationally beyond that. All those partners need to be part of this. I think how you embed this in a local community, this is a kind of key question. We often talk about the projects being for clients who are looking to attract global talent. And of course, attracting global talent almost automatically means you're not going to be bringing all your scientists from the local community, and what we need to avoid is the idea that these very high-profile projects are dropped into a local population that are alienated by something that they see as is not for them. In fact, I think, looking back on it, and it was interesting to hear about the Olympic Park. We were involved with UCL East there. There was a massive program of outreach by UCL, which was very impressive and is continuing. Equally, the public's invited into the university, and I think, that's the important thing, to invite the public in, and that's what we're doing at the Fleming Centre as well, with those lower 2 ground floors. So it's not the case that everyone locally is going to be ending up as a high-profile scientist in these buildings, but hopefully engagement with the issues, certainly in the case of UCL, will attract them towards perhaps a different career route, engagement with universities more generally, and in the case of the Fleming Centre, obviously an awareness of this broader public health issue that we're trying to promote. So I think it's about inviting the public in. Yeah. And of course, that's into the building, but it's also offering something back in terms of public realm, the spaces between the buildings, the spaces that bring people together, not just those people who are working on site, but also allow them to engage more directly in the pub and the spaces around that allow you to engage more as a broader society rather than being siloed in the building itself.
It's interesting to think about the different models and ways in which we measure the impact of these places. And actually, at the last conference that we had last year, we had Emma Frost here, who chairs the UK Innovation District, of course, been heavily involved with LLDC. And she was talking about some of those measurements of success, of kind of impact being almost the kind of sticky fingers on the window. It's that local engagement. It's people being part of these places as much as anything else that you can start to measure. So
it absolutely is. I mean, I think one of the most joyful things about our Zayed Centre for Research building, which is obviously, the point about the interaction is that the children can see the scientists who are working on their treatments, and the scientists see the young people who are benefiting from what they're doing. So it's the translational research model. But what we learned early on is you get this little row of sticky nose prints along the glass on the window at child height, where all the children are looking in at that laboratory. And I think when we saw that kind of smudge horizontally, we thought, yes, it's getting there.
Which is amazing, and it's such an important thing to open these buildings up, which can seem quite, they can be quite closed. If we don't kind of really think on that properly. And so, Francesca, just to build on that, you touched quite a lot on the broader impact of the site and how you measure that. But I'd be interested to hear, particularly we talked quite a bit around health, and as you mentioned, health creating cities is going to be a big focus coming up for NLA. How do you kind of, I suppose, measure some of the broader health benefits of what you're doing for the communities that sit around you?
Yeah, I'll come to that in a second. It's a big question, and the honest answer is we're working through how to measure that, but I'll come back and tell you more. Just to say more on the UCL case, I mean, they'll get bigged up here, but they're a great institution, so they deserve it. It's also about going into the community. I mean, and so they are also training, local unemployed people to become citizen scientists, to then inform, 10-year longitudinal studies that they do on prosperity in the local region, and then that translates into local policy in the councils. So it's not just about inviting people in, it's about going out and engaging in training and, offering opportunity locally. So yeah, it's both. So the health question and measuring. We're thinking it at the moment in a very broad terms. So I mentioned before, at a basic level, we are an asset manager as well as a landowner, as well as the other things I mentioned, inward investment, blah, blah, blah. We have an amazing park. We have, which is so wild as well as manicured. And we have amazing world-class sporting venues that are also community venues, that are also, places for concerts and things like that. And then these, amazing institutions on the park that are doing world-leading global health research and coming up with interesting technologies. So I think what we're asking ourselves at the moment is, what role can the park or a district like this that is so diverse play in choosing some specific questions around health and creating an intervention. And that is honestly the stage we're at, because health is a bit of a new agenda area for us. But equally, I mentioned the Retrofit Academy and the housing retrofit agenda. For us, that's an interesting topic, yes, because the built environment is one of the biggest polluters, if you will, in terms of carbon and emissions, but also because of the health outcomes for residents. So, we know that moldy and damp homes have a really, really bad impact on people's health, mental health as well as physical health. And so if we can, play a role in that agenda area, in, hopefully kind of accelerating the housing retrofit programs across the subregion, and crucially providing a pipeline of talent into that agenda, we will also be tackling health. And so this is the kind of broad way that we're thinking about it. But yeah, in terms of the specific outcomes and measurements, that's something we're working on at the moment to really focus down.
But it's got to be, as you say, included as part of that whole thinking about the holistic place, its impact. Obviously, you talked quite clearly around the employment benefits that can come, but yeah, thinking about it as part of that whole. Liz, I just want, before I come to questions from you, just to give you a warning. Liz, I wanted to ask about, as local authorities across London are looking at how they can, lean into, develop, start to be part of the kind of innovation story of London. And of course, you had already a real historic background in the cancer hub that was in the borough already. But I wanted to ask a little bit about how you as a borough have kind of positioned yourself to be able to attract that sort of long-term capital to this site. Because of course you have to demonstrate that you are going to be, you're the right partner, that you're investing in the right places. I wanted to ask a little bit about how that kind of process came about, that you were able to attract Aviva with Socius kind of part of it, and I'll get your view on it as well, Elodie.
Great. I think part of it is realising where a local authority can add value and what our role should be within innovation districts, and where we need to step back and let other people come to the fore as well and use their specialisms. So we were incredibly lucky that businesses want to work with the Institute of Cancer Research and Royal Marsden because they're world-leading organisations, and that is one of the things that will attract businesses to the site. And that certainty as well is one of the things that will then attract investment into the London Cancer Hub. So working with those partners and thinking around a joint vision that will work for them as well is really important, because that's one of the key selling points. From a local authority point of view, to some extent it was around de-risking the development. So making sure that the planning policy said what it needed to support the growth of this innovation district. We demolished the old redundant hospital buildings on the site, which weren't suitable for modern life sciences use. So that meant it reduced the cost of the development, and also meant they would be able to proceed at pace when they secured planning permission. Things like, the transport, that was something that we could have control over. We could secure levelling up funding and do that early work to support the transport, so that helped the development as well. And we did try different models to take forward development. So we tried a procurement route, we explored things like joint ventures, and then ultimately we carried out a sales process. And we completed that as quickly as we could, whilst still making sure that we got the right partner on board, because we know that things change in the market and people want to get going. If they've got an opportunity there, they want to complete that and be able to move into the next phase, and for it not to drag on for an extended period of time. So that was something that was in our gift, was to move as quickly as we could in that development. And I think in Sutton we do also have that stability. We've been a Lib Dem council for a number of years, and that was a result at the recent local election. So it gives that political stability. But there is also support for the London Cancer Hub across the borough, because it creates that local pride and it delivers national benefits, but also really does deliver local benefits in terms of those jobs and skills. And I think since we've done the deal with Aviva, our role has changed. So there's been a really close relationship with our planning colleagues through the planning application process. And for us, it's around how do you harness those local benefits? So how could we work with Aviva and Socius and Populate as a local authority to support the local benefits to be delivered so that residents felt the benefit from the London Cancer Hub coming forward?
Thank you. And Elida, do you have anything to add in terms of what you were kind of looking for from the local authority to make this partnership really work?
Yeah, I mean, I used to work for a local authority, and I think when I got onto the developer side, we all have our frustrations, but I think from a Sutton perspective, I think Liz talked about it, having leadership who bought into the long-term vision for London Cancer Hub was really important. That was politically and from the kind of chief exec side. Really clear timetables as well, which, if I'm honest, when we first heard the timetables, we went, oh, whatever, that's never going to happen. And it did. You know, I remember working on a bid through the summer holidays, and by December we'd signed a contract, which is unheard of. So Sutton were really, really focused on timetables. They'd done a lot of the due diligence in advance. We had all the heads of terms and the AFL through the bidding process. So I think having that type of determination that we are going to meet the timetables really worked for us, because then we have certainty from our perspective about the resource we're going to put into it and when this is actually going to come through. And I think also, we talked a lot earlier about governance, and Sutton had done a lot of the work in terms of setting up those structures. So all the partners knew their role. They were not replaceable. You are the hospital, you're the transport authority. So everyone knew what their role was, and it convened that group for a number of years. And again, all behind that one mission: we are here for cancer and cancer research and cancer drug discovery. So all of that really created the right environment for us to step into. And I remember when Aviva were considering whether to invest in it. And Aviva decided that from their perspective, this was about investing in health infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So for them, again, it wasn't a real estate play. It was about how do we get involved in kind of improving people's treatment outcomes and improving long-term life chances. So it really took a different approach. But all of that the ground was set already by Sutton Council.
Great, thank you very much. Now, do we have any questions from our audience? Yes, we've got one just over there, and then we'll come to you over there next.
There's a huge body of evidence around creative health interventions, and indeed the creative health interventions are now being integrated into the NHS approach. Last week, the APPG for Creative Health, convened by the National Academy of Social Prescribing, you brought together a lot of those local and grassroots organisations. Are you in dialogue, or is there space in this placemaking initiative to place the National Academy of Social Prescribing really at the heart of and integrate with your own different approaches?
Thank you. Francesca, would you like to?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, social prescribing has a rich history in the East End already, and I think lots of our local partners are involved in that. We're beginning a conversation with East Bank partners, so the Victoria and Albert Museum, Sadler's Wells, London College of Fashion, UCL, about the creative health agenda, and that's actually one of their kind of top mission themes, and particularly that the idea that digital and data-led solutions could come into play as well, very much the creative experience and its connection to health. So yeah, I think the answer is yes. And that is something we're just really starting to kind of push on as an agenda area for the Olympic Park. Did you want to, anyone else on social prescribing?
Thank you. We had another question just over here. Microphone is just on its way over to you. And again, if you can say your name and company before you ask a question.
I'm Zach Wilcox from Mott. Yeah?
That's good.
Yeah. Cool. Zach Wilcox from Mott McDonald. I'm working with a lot of, another innovation corridor with East West Rail and Oxcombe ARC, and quite interested in the idea of kind of the operation systems model that you were talking about, Francesca. But when we're earlier on in this process, what are the things that we need to be thinking about from a master planning stage so that we don't bake in the wrong things And do you provide the flexibility for the right things for the operating system to work? Big one, sorry.
Straight to you then.
It's a big question. Well, I think I said it at the beginning of the presentation that, the diverse blend of assets that everybody's mentioned in their innovation districts are really important. So you do need the right workspace, you do need the right transport infrastructure, you do need the right types of housing around the district. That core infrastructure is key. You do need spaces for leisure and for nature. These are all important things, but I think the added value and then drive to really push what an innovation district can be comes with that partnership selection and thinking about the different requirements from capital to knowledge to people capital and networks, and then making that concerted effort over periods of time, over administrations. That's something we've had to work really hard over political administrations to keep making the case for continued investment. So I think it's all those things that you have to consider, and to do that with your local place, not to do it in a boardroom. And what I mean by that is collaborating with local organizations who've been at it for a long time, and as well as incoming investors and partners, so that is a mutual process of shaping long-term kind of strategy. Would be my
Yeah.
I was just going to add a couple of things. I think you mentioned the word flexibility, and I think that's a word that we use a lot, because I think there has to be enough flex in the physical master plan, but also in the mindset of people working on it, that we're not set, we're working on 20, 30-year projects. Those use classes can move, they can change, they can evolve, but also using the time now to test things, because bringing the community along, sometimes we don't know if it's going to work. We're not sure, but actually having the opportunity to test ideas, to use a place as a learning opportunity, means that we can try things out before we then go all in and say that's exactly what we're going to do. So a couple of things around flexibility and just trying things out a little bit.
I also was interested that there were a couple of points made around the use of temporary space as well. And I suppose, how far do you see temporary space has a role to play here?
Hugely.
Test.
Yeah, I think
out.
testing, but also, a lot of our large master plans they take years. We've got to get through design process and get through planning, and then we have to procure, and then it's, we're talking about 4 or 5 years before anything happens. And once we've engaged deeply in communities, people want to see stuff. They actually want to get involved. So actually opening up that space, one, is important to bring people in, get them to use it, but two, also to try things out, because we don't, we might just think we're going to turn it into a, 50 labs or 50,000 square feet of something, and it might not work. So actually, why don't we give an opportunity to try things out? So it's a good learning opportunity, but it's also a great way to activate a place before the long-term development comes on board, and to bring people in.
Great, thank you. Now we're just coming up to time. There's so much more that we could cover in this discussion, but I don't want to kind of eat too much into your networking time after this as well. So I guess just kind of to conclude this session, we've had such fascinating kind of conversation around the partnerships that help to make these types of spaces work. I'd like to ask each of you, if we were to kind of look in 10 years' time, kind of what do you see as being the kind of real key ingredient that will make an innovation district either work or not work? Kind of what is that kind of, what is that really kind of key ingredient that we're going to see? Because we're going to see quite a lot of development happening. We're going to see lots of people trying out different things, but kind of, what's the real kind of success criterion? Try and pick a different one each if you can. Elida, you get the easier job of starting.
I'm going to say all. I think the diversity of reasons for you to be in an innovation district. So it's learning, living, working, playing, enjoying. So really thinking about a person's experience of that place throughout the day. And also, importantly, we talk a lot about in the weekend. These places shouldn't be soulless after work, at working hours. So how do we create a place that really does enable that to happen throughout the day and even in the weekends, and given for me, the collision of spaces, the collision of young people alongside people working in a clinical environment, where do we enable those things to happen? So that's, for me, would be important.
Thank you. Gavin?
this is slightly related, but
all right.
I think
That's okay,
you know what makes London such an exciting place is the the density, proximity, diversity of people and ideas. That's why a lot of us are want to live here and work here, and those are the things that make for a successful innovation district. So, I think when we're talking about innovation districts, there's a slight fear in the back of my mind that, despite best endeavours, they're a sort of citadel of science and tech. Actually, what we need to be creating is genuine urban quarters, which are, mixed use and are melded with the rest of the city. They're just sort of turning up the volume a bit in certain aspects of that city. And you shouldn't be just walking into them and thinking, I'm somewhere, I'm in an innovation district. It should happen effortlessly, and they should be part of our general urban experience. So I hope that's the way that we're heading.
Thank you. Francesca?
From the Olympic Park perspective, I'm going to say it's about focus, actually. I think we've got a really interdisciplinary, really diverse ecosystem of actors and assets and features in the district. And I think finding a focus point where everyone does their own thing in their own network and drives some amazing outcomes, but finding a focus point like that singular mission that allows us to make a significant transformation regionally, I think is going to be a secret ingredient for us, and probably lead to kind of more exemplary, case for the UK and how you can mobilize, real inclusive growth off the back of one of these things. That focus leading to impact and outcome.
Thank you. And Liz, you got the hardest job at the end.
I mean, I think from the London Cancer Hub point of view, it's the site being built out in line with planning and the buildings being full, but it's that ecosystem and collaboration between partners, which is the real success, so that you don't just have businesses based there working alone because they're linked to cancer, but actually you have collaboration between partners and businesses based on site, which is driving meaningful change, meaning that we're furthering drug discovery, furthering treatment and research, and there's that link beyond the London Cancer Hub as well, and we're collaborating with other districts across London and with the UK as well.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, all of you. That's been an absolutely fascinating conversation, incredible collection of case studies of what London's doing, where London's leading. And I think, bringing it back to the conversation we had earlier, we really heard about why, we should be really confident with London in terms of where we sit. We're not always very good at sort of speaking confidently as a city about what we can do, what we can deliver, but London really has incredible movement in this area, a real kind of global leader. We've heard about the kind of growing, obviously we know about the growing kind of opportunity in AI, but how that's kind of really shifting the focus, and also this opportunity for much more kind of innovative, flexible leasing that kind of comes from that and enables that to happen. And I think the kind of point, Francesca, you kind of made it earlier quite clearly here around placemaking, how we're really moving from this thinking about a collection of buildings, a collection of assets, to really this systems kind of orchestra that really is key to making these places work. So thank you all for kind of presenting that also clearly and building on that from there as well. We are off to UK Reef this week, as I mentioned. I'm sure a few people are. We'll be out there as NLA launching our One Built Environment campaign, which is all about recognising this incredible built environment sector that we have here in London as one, and the opportunities that would bring for us to and grow our sector and grow new skills and really help to align policy across everything that we're doing to deliver these incredible places that we're talking about there. So we hope to see you there. We'll be out and about talking about it, and out at the Canary, particularly on Wednesday at 4 o'clock if you want to come and join us there. And also just another plug for something coming up is the Built World Summit, which will be a global conversation about cities taking place here in the Guildhall On the 29th of June, we'll be hearing from cities all around the world around how we are really building kind of innovation ecosystems and placing London within that broader global picture. So I hope for any of you that are kind of thinking about the global picture there, you'll look at that as well. But it's very much time for you to now have a bit more opportunity for networking. So thank you all so much for coming, for your questions. And again, let's give our panel a final round of applause. Thank you.